Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flizanes, your empowerment strategist and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Because it's still February at the time of this release and Valentine's Day, I thought this was a great episode to release right now. It is the love language of the body with Dr. Miriam Rahav. She is a return guest, and this is not her last episode. Because of my alignment with Dr. Rahav and the kinds of conversations that we end up having, I, by accident, announce a new business that I'm doing in this episode. And while I wasn't really ready to tell everybody what it was or what I'm doing, I have changed my mind. So if anyone is interested as you go through this episode and you want to learn more, you can go to jjflizanes.com/learn more. And that's as much as I'll say right now. So Dr. Rahav is a triple board physician, and she deals with internal medicine, functional medicine. She's also a certified acupuncturist through the Tri-State School of Acupuncture. She is trained in ART through the Klinghardt Academy, and importantly, in metabolic and terrain-centric approaches to oncology with Dr. Nasha Winters. Dr. Rahav started an integrative medicine center in the heart of New York City in 2017, where she is joined by colleagues in offering heart-centered integrative medicine to a diverse community of fellow humans. And you can find more about that at rahavwellness.com, RAHAV wellness.com. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you're here on YouTube, she is back, Dr. Miriam Rahav. We love her. We adore her. We're so excited to have this conversation about the love language of the body. Oh my God, I'm so excited. And if you're on the podcast, we did do a video. So come on over to jjflizanes.tv if you want to see us have this conversation or be in our energy in a different way. If you're finding this on YouTube and you don't know me and you decide you don't like me, I am totally cool with that. Miriam, where can they find more about just you?
More about just me is on my website, my work website. Thank you so much, JJ, for this opportunity, this conversation. I'm really excited as well. So my website is rahavwellness.com. That's RAHAV as in Victor, wellness, one word.com. And then there's Miriam Rahav MD on Instagram, and Rahav Wellness has a Facebook page. And then one day, with your inspiration, because of the amazing work that you do, maybe I'll also be able to point you towards a podcast. Let's put that out there in the ether.
Maybe, I think inevitably, we just don't know when it's going to be. You will have your own podcast. I am sure of it, with or without my help. There's nothing stopping the need that the world has for your voice, your frequency, and your inspiration. So,
oh, my sweetheart, right back at you. And thank you for all the incredible work you do. In fact, I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since our last one.
Thank you. Me too. Okay. So we're talking about the love language of the body. Let's start there. What does that mean for someone who's thinking love language of the body? Is that the same love languages as Dr. Gary Chapman talks about?
If you teach me more about that, I can tell you if it's the same.
So Dr. Gary Chapman wrote a book, because I use it in most of the work that I do. And it's called, and I've actually, what's funny is I've added in my Empowerment Strategist program 2 more. So he covers 5 love languages, which are touch, words of affirmation, this is more for like couples, like how you show love, and actually with anybody, with your children, with your parents, how you show love and affection. So you are definitely words of affirmation, and you are probably quality time. And that would be my guess about you. Words of affirmation and quality time. But there's touch, gifts, and acts of service. So those are the 5 love languages to help couples really receive love in a different way, because maybe it's not their language. I, with my Empowerment Strategist program and my next book, which who knows when that's coming, but we're working on it. That I've added 2 more, which are ritual and food. It's like of service, and there's a reasons why, but ritual and food would be the 2 I'm going to add as my 7. But let's talk a little bit about how you interpret and how your meaning behind love language of the body.
What I mean really is just in my appointed role in this lifetime so far, working as a physician, I look deeply at physiology and I study physiology. And what I mean when I say the love language of the body has to do with our physiology, has to do with our design, has to do with our biochemistry. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that I will meet someone, I will hear their story, I will ask questions, I will clarify, I want to understand the timeline, and I'm looking largely at imbalances. I'm looking at imbalances and trying to understand the strata of those imbalances. And then I look at laboratories, and in our world, in the integrative functional medicine and integrative oncology world, when we're trying to unravel an imbalance, and generally because of the kind of work I do, I'm trying to understand and grow insight into complex imbalances. And so in order to understand complex imbalances, we do very rich investigation. And laboratory work and blood work is part of that. And we're looking at things like things we can understand, I think, and connecting more easily, things like vitamins and minerals, selenium, iodine, copper, zinc, magnesium, phosphorus. And then we start looking at vitamin D, vitamin C, the B spectrum of vitamins. But what's incredible to me is that oftentimes you'll see a lot of deficiencies in those arenas, and that those are so many different conversations about, food quality and density and environmental and all those really, really interesting pieces of physiology or challenges to physiology that I, within my community in collaboration, grapple with very deeply and intensely every day. But then I took a step back and I said, it's so incredible. I'll give someone, let's say, a B complex because they're low, and minerals. But then what happens? How the body incorporates that on a cellular level and applies it by default. And this is where the love comes in, to healing. The default of the body. I'm going to say that sentence again. The default, the program, programmed by who, by what, where, how, is to heal. The body won't take that and, waste it. The body will take it and apply it to the best of its ability to repair, to build, to mobilize things that don't serve the body out. And it happens by design. And how unbelievably mind-boggling, awesome that our design is actually made by love. That's what I mean. That I have the intention of serving, but I'm just kind of an observer. I'm a kind of witness. I'm a kind of, I intend to observe keenly and to try to see what should be seen. But then we select some tools, and then you apply them. That person takes it in, and then the body sets to work. None of that we are willing. All of that is automatic. Do we ever stop to realize? I mean, I think there are some times when we stop, when we see the miracle of birth, of a new life coming out of a body. I mean, we, have sex, but then everything else just happens. It's not that you're saying, okay, that little, we call the first few cells and they split and then they turn into this thing that looks like a raspberry called a morula. And then, it turns into an embryo. And then there's all of a sudden there's a beating heart. Like, what in the world? I love what my rabbi said. He said, there are things that we see every day. Just because we see them every day does not diminish the miraculous. The sunrise, wow, and I think so much about tuning in to the frequency of the love language of the body is what just before we were speaking about the doing versus the being. It's like if we can slow down enough, we can see the miracle of the being. And I think because of the work that I do as a physician, where I'm grappling with complex problems, where it's not an autopilot, it's a focus, it's an examination. And then because it's a complex problem, there's a circling back. So I can see through what people report in their experience. And I can see in the labs the shift. It's funny. Sometimes I'll see someone who comes in and they don't look that bad on paper, because sometimes the body is stunned. It's frozen. It can't even tell the story. But I hear and I feel what they're telling me about not being themselves, that disconnect from self. And they're trying to put, and what we get to do together, and this is kind of the interpersonal love language, is that I know that they're right because they come in, because we inhabit these bodies, and there's a wisdom there if we allow ourselves to experience it. What dis-ease really is, potentially, if we understand the love language of our body, it's we might be disconnecting. And dis-ease is actually a reminder to come back into the body and inhabit it. Maybe we've been too hurt on the emotional, on the astral, so that we have been even frightened out of our bodies. But our body is there to love us and support us and to heal and be the instrument of healing through which we can also anchor our soul mission of ascendance. And so understanding that this truly is and intended to be a temple, one that will default into healing, into cleansing, into supporting out of the love that, I don't know, divine cosmic forces, if you will, that we're designed with, so that we can tap into. And the other piece of the love language of the body is that we have literally a hardware for ascendance. And the work of Joe Dispenza, I think, does a really masterful job of explaining that concretely in detail. The vagus nerve, the highway of the parasympathetic. We literally have the hard wiring for presence and unity. Unbelievable that from the vagus, there is a branch to the voice box, the recurrent laryngeal nerve, so that when we sing, which is something that I experience, creating or being in voices singing in unison as a state of bliss, of beauty and joy. And that is probably because we are hardwired, right, to experience that as a state of unity and flow. I mean, my best time ever in high school was in chorus, when the music, it was like the music, and I'd just be standing there singing myself with goosebumps up and down. That's hardwiring.
Yeah.
To actually be in an experience of bliss and togetherness and beauty and joy. And we are designed to be able to have that. What is that? That's what I'm calling all of those meditations and those experiences and those exposures that I have in my work. I'm experiencing that all as the love language, the cosmic love language of the body.
I love it. Because it's another way, I can hear Abraham saying wellness is your, wellness and well-being is the state of the universe. And whether you're disconnected or connected to it is up to you. It's always there. It is flowing all the time. It's a stream of wellness and well-being, and you just need to connect to it. Or most of us stay disconnected to it in many different subjects in our lives and have resistance to things. As you were talking, I was thinking obviously of so many things, but and I say obviously now because you and I talked for close to an hour before we even pressed record. So of course my brain's going, my synapses are like, oh, this, oh, that. So I want to bring it back to, because I'm curious about this for me too, for you. So in your practice, you started out your practice and you didn't have a specific type of person. It was just healing. It was all the different tools that you have as a physician. And now there's a section, a group of people of let's say cancer patients that you're working with. Can you talk to me about your experience with what you just talked about, the love language of the body? And I want to tell you just a quick little story before, so that you can see like sort of the container in which I'm looking for this answer, or at least any similarity to sort of my experience. I have a client who has had a same cancer 3 times, possibly now a 4th time. And our Nation, I've talked about this several times, and you and I even talked about this, like cancer is like the ultimate disconnect. So when you're talking about the love language of the body and the connection and the ascendance and the transcendence and the hardwiring that we have for well-being, for healing, for this love language of source, God, creator, whatever, universe. And I'm with you on that, obviously 100,000,000%. So when we talk about like having something that has disconnected us for the reasons that you mentioned, some kind of emotional trauma or sort of separating from the body as a way to protect, or that you think you're protecting, and we need to come into the body. I know a lot of people, when they get a cancer diagnosis, the first thing they want to do is go get it out. And I forget where we were talking about this, whether it be you and I talked about this or somebody else and I talked about that in Chinese medicine, they don't even consider it cancer, that it's stagnation. And it's not something outside of you, it's something inside of you, which means it's a part of you. So this separation, this disconnection, this take it out and throw it away as if it's something that came into my body from the external, which it might have, but your body had to agree to go with it. Because I think in this connected state of allowing ourselves to heal and be connected, that we can weather more storms. We can find a way to balance. We can find a way to detoxify. Our body will help to heal it if it's in that energy of the love language of the body, in that love. But when we're disconnected and now we have that same toxin / opportunity to pull in something, now we're not in the vibration or frequency of the healing of it. We're in the vibration of being disconnected. So we're holding it, and now it's potentially metastasizing and morphing into and growing into and creating negative momentum. So for this client, I said to her, as she was really clear she wanted to go get it out, I said, just something to think about, as this might be a fourth time. If you think of it as separate from you, it's like an enemy. If we think of it as part of you, part of the journey I think that she's on is to love all parts of her and to love it away. Not that she's not to do other things, and not that she isn't even to remove it. It's the resistance or the disconnection from a part of my body that's the problem. Taking it out might be a problem, but I think there's a peace to be made. There's a love to have. There's an acknowledgement. There's a willingness to say, this is a part of me. And even though it's right now not doing well for me and it's hurting me in ways or potentially threatening me in ways, it's like easing that energy around that it's still you versus it's separate from you. It's the enemy. I have to put up my dukes. I have to have resistance. I have to think I'm going to fight the war on cancer, And so as I started to say that, it felt better. And through time and through talking about things, it started to kind of get softer and get a little smaller. And we're not sure yet where we are with that, but it's changing. But not all cancer patients are open to that conversation. So I'm curious for you, when you are working with people coming in and you're in this love language of the body and the healing and the love. Now, you as a person are so full of love and light that you're going to soften anybody that walks in the room. But I'm just curious as to where you see the group of patients who have cancer, who are coming to see you, as collectively, like, where are they the same in this love language of the body? Do they think the body heals itself? Do they feel like they're fighting? You know what I mean? That's kind of what just because I know you treat everybody. You don't just take cancer patients, and I can see that you attract people who want to be in your energy, who believe the way you do and think the way you do, and really honor your just depth of expertise in so many areas. And then I wonder about the people that show up because they don't want to do conventional and they're not in that energy. How do they respond to that? And how do you open them, or do you open them to accept this?
Oh, such a profound question. I think the answer that's bubbling up inside of me as I'm listening to your question, and of course your question also comes from experience and being so intuitive and talented and really feeling being able to see and feel not just the physical body, but your amazing wheelhouse in the emotional, in the astral body, and seeing it. I feel like you can almost see it, and you can see the roadblock, and like, how do we connect and reach? And I think the word that bubbled up in my mind was consciousness. That we are in different places of consciousness, and that I was thinking about what can occupy our sensorium and therefore our consciousness. There's so many things around us, visual and auditory and strong emotional. I mean, I was just thinking about, world events and news and media and how alarming it is. And so that we oftentimes, unless we are intentionally trying to create and hold space, again, consciously, intentionally, for not having that constant, turning off the news. I mean, essentially, this keeps on coming up for me, is the concept, not of keeping the Sabbath per se, but the concept of a Sabbath, which is a concept of rest, a concept of, by law, certainly in the Jewish tradition, which of course is mine, which is why I can speak to it. It's just more familiar, of turning off the lights and turning off the devices and not driving and praying, which again involves the voice box and going into flow and unity. And it's a slowing down, and it's family time, and it's food together, right? It's that, and it's also understood in the way it's described that the divine wanted in all of creation for there also to be rest, for there also to be a space to be and not do. And it's so incredible to me that that concept is there, and it's there. It's kind of like, I'm here and you're here, and we hold space for this consciousness. And the Sabbath is here, and the Torah is here, and the ritual, which speaking of ritual, I mean, this is incredible. This is such an unbelievable mind meld. So, the ritual is here and prescribed through tradition for millennia, and yet not everyone keeps it or holds that space for it. It's like we need to give ourselves, I think, permission to slow down. And sometimes when things are really scary, if we slow down, we might feel them. And so I think I maybe just understand that when someone comes in, that they are magnificent and that they're also so hurt for various reasons, that the more I can understand, sometimes people come and they don't know that they're hurt or how hurt that they are. It's kind of a grasping, and I've had that in my own journey, that I've done things or chosen things that I don't even fully know why, and only in hindsight I can see how my soul was kind of charting a path more and more consciously, that I understand people don't come to me because they've arrived. People come to me and they might not even know why they're coming to me, but there's something there, and I accept it with all my heart as the gift that it clearly is. And then the opportunity because I start asking the questions about who are you and what's important to you, and do you remember when things started maybe not being right, because someone will come and they'll say maybe cancer, but we'll go back in the story and they started having, I met someone yesterday with a cancer diagnosis, who's 63, but he was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at the age of 9. So there's a really big story there that goes all the way back. And he said something amazing. He says, I've never thought of myself as sick, which is really beautiful because he didn't take on that role or that identity. However, it was interesting on the other side of that, very spiritual being, very beautiful being. But it was almost like he was so much out of his body and very connected to spirituality, but the body is calling him home and saying, don't forget, it's a balance. It's a balance. And he actually almost, it seems like, and also wasn't supported because medicine seems to be just so the medicine I was trained in formally as a medical doctor. I've been trained broadly and widely and mystically and magnificently across all of these traditions. And again, that's my consciousness willing that, choosing that, and hungering for that, so that then when someone comes in, I will often, it'll just happen, right? It will just be like the gift of, and again, it's kind of ties back to this love language of the body. What I wanted to say, it's by design, it's by cosmic forces of love, and that I understand that someone's being brought to me by those same cosmic forces, and that all of my, and totality of my journey so far, something will be there and be channeled to meet that opportunity. Again, that's part of the love language that grows from the co-creation, the collaboration of beings when they come together and are in each other's heart space, right? Because our heart chakra just emits energy. And I think that experience of being together and I will get information when I'm in that space. And so what I got from him is that no one was anchoring him in his body. And so his spiritual practice was actually a way of being out of the body. And that what we explored together was the possibility that a spiritual practice can be through the body, just as much as it can be, on that, in those higher vibratory consciousnesses, that both, I see Dr. Klinghardt is a dear mentor and teacher of mine, and just brilliant. And he created, and if any of your community wants to look this up, I think it's really magnificent. It's his 5 levels of healing, and he maps it out. There's a visual, and he talks first about the physical. The physical is the most objective, and that's where we have our mechanics and our chemistry, and our physiology, and that is where medicine lives. And it's a portal, because above that we have the emotional, and that, does he call it the emotional? I should literally pull it up so I can speak to it. I wasn't planning about speaking on it, but it's coming up. And then you have, so that is where, or, I think where maybe he calls it, it's the physical and then the energy and then the mental, because that's where also there are certain tools in medicine, for example, the EKG, that register wave and frequency. Our imaging is using particles and light, MRI and CAT scans and X-rays, EKGs and EEG, those are energetic tests. So in some ways, we are always dealing with energy. I say that also when people come in, like, when you walk into a room who you might like or who you might have some reticence from. We are energy beings. We're not given the language or the ability to speak to that, but it is our experience, all of us. And we also do it in medicine, but we don't speak about it that way. So again, it's this idea of the miraculous, because we're just exposed to it, that somehow it becomes mundane, but it is not mundane at all. And that there's miraculous in all of these things. And I think when we slow down, right, we can experience it as miraculous, and we can experience the miraculous of our design and experience that as love. And that can change our consciousness and shift our relationship with whatever is happening there. So that's kind of one answer. The other, which is related to it again through the portal of physiology, is we have a lot of real physical interferences. We also have informational, like our bandwidth. I think we have, kind of a certain amount of lanes in our highway of our bandwidth of consciousness. And on the physical, we have chemicals that can disrupt our own biochemistry. Let's say it's a heavy metal that is toxic to our mitochondria, which is the place in our cells where we make energy, we can have imposed upon us a low energy state. And in a low energy state, we can't connect because, of course, the love language is a higher vibratory reality. But we have to have the energy to be in it. And so sometimes what I'm doing in my love language of the body is I'm simply examining and putting a name to an interference with our default majesty and simply helping it get out of the way so the body can step into its natural state. So that's another, and there are more. I mean, heavy metals, pesticides, and we can speak about the minutia of that, which is very important, very interesting, and definitely what I'm doing in my office. I'm really teaching that so people can anchor. There's nothing inherently wrong with you. You've had these superimpositions, almost like a black cloud over you, which, by the way, was also my experience with mercury toxicity from a very early age. And having had that and having grown into and being able to step more, I felt when I had my first heavy metal detox, which was a whole other story, which I told in our other, kind of when we were talking about spirituality and medicine, and you're like, how did you get here? I was like, okay, this is a big story. And so I spoke about it there. I don't want to, we can always go back, or your community can go back if they're interested in that. But I literally had the experience of my own black cloud being lifted. And physically, every time I did a coffee, a Colima, which is kind of like a mega coffee enema as part of this fast and detox, and could literally have like there was an offload literally of mercury winds up. I didn't know that then, but I know that now. I could literally experience, it almost felt like being electrified, energy like going through me. And what a teacher told me was that was the interference with my cellular energy lifting, so I could actually feel the currents reconnect. So as someone who has been disconnected, not because I willed it, but because it was imposed, and then found my way, sheerly by the grace of God, into a solution that saved my life. And I didn't have any of the understanding. I came from the background of education. Again, that was in the other podcast. But I felt, experienced. And on the 6th day of this prolonged fast, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, Miriam, you've just saved your own life. I now have a different consciousness. I was saved by divine cosmic forces of love. But what I also learned then was I was being saved for a reason. And so when people come and they're in that disconnect, that's me. That's me 25 years ago. And if I can sponsor and foster the journey to having that interference removed, and all the more quickly and all the more efficiently because of the journey, because I've paid for that in my dharma, I can accompany, and I have the confidence and the enthusiasm or the excitement to see what their experience. They'll connect closer to the truth of the love that was there. But just like me, I could have just as easily been disconnected from it, but was given grace. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And thank you for that story. And I know before we hit record and we were talking about all kinds of things. And I think you had asked me, or you had said, and I know based on, the short, brief time that I get with you or with the others that come on the show, like a lot of you don't really know what I do, minus the podcasting piece, right? And the only reason why I'm bringing this up right now is because of literally what you just said. It's so beautiful. And I know you do it in multiple levels. It's not just physical, but you're looking at, okay, what blocks someone's natural, as Abraham would say, rising of the cork. What can we remove that's preventing the connection from well-being or from the body healing itself and the love language of the body? and you're looking at all the physical reasons why the body's being challenged and maybe resisting its transcendence and healing. I do that with emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is interpretations. I've spent some time, and I think this is an interesting, like, kind of combination of love language of the body, because I was interviewed today myself on a podcast and was told to sort of explain what empowerment strategist meant. And so I kind of, and it was a quick show, so not like mine that goes on for an hour or more, but so it was a quick show. So I tried to like make it like succinct, but it was, and it's been recent that I don't even know who I was talking to, maybe my acupuncturist, and I was saying that I'm coming into this new place where in the past, when I looked at emotion, and again, to me, that I'm in agreement with everything you have said. I'm in alignment with everything you've said. And I feel that strongly about it. And I know, and even in the physical part, I mean, I have trainers that I'm training, and we do have a section on the physical, not because I want them to go out and give people health or wellness tips, but there are some basic human needs like sleep. If someone has not had a decent night REM, like deep sleep, for a long time, they are not going to be able, like, this is contributing to the anxiety, the depression, the crabbiness, the out of alignment. That is if someone is dehydrated, right? Like, we have so many reasons why we, again, physically get pulled out of. We're not going to be able to focus emotionally or be in a more conscious state if our physical body is out of balance in that way. It's going to pull us for sure. So that's why that piece has to be in there, because I need them to at least like be able to look at someone's sort of vital signs, if you will, like, okay, because if there's a momentum going of workaholism and too much caffeine and not sleeping, and like we're seeing that we have to get the physical body and to rest and to be in a different state and parasympathetic for us to even have this conversation. Otherwise, it's just another thing.
And that's huge. And sometimes we, that's where we have to be. It's like kind of a triage. And when you look, for example, because we know actually, and there's the work of Dr. Emoto, who also, saying a word, and that words and frequency actually registers and creates physical form. And so on the emotions, sometimes we have, just like mercury has a frequency that's toxic to mitochondria and many other things, on the physical, a word, stupid, ugly, we get called and it carries, and sometimes it's an imposition, and sometimes it's an imposition that's been there so frequently and so relentlessly that we believe it and we take it in, and it creates a vibration within ourselves. One of the questions I ask people sometimes, and again, these are things just come to me as I listen to someone's story, I say, tell me about your self-talk. How do you speak to yourself? What do you say to yourself? Do you say, wow, that was really hard. I'm so proud of you. You did it. Like, where we don't notice, or the thoughts that we have about ourselves as we look into the mirror, where we probably are just by default more critical and self-critical. And what we're shown in the outside world, females, of course, but also males, is, how to pull ourselves apart instead of how to build ourselves up. Like, oh, this isn't right and that isn't right. I loved when I was watching the movie The Help, where she taught the little girl every day, you're kind, you're smart, you're important. And that we can manifest that's also programming, vital programming that is much closer to the truth. And that the negative magnetics have a gravity to them that can occupy, it's just, I guess, the way we are, that it can occupy so much of our consciousness that, we can have 30, just the fact that we're here and that the computers worked and there's light and we had the time and that there's enough space in our lives, enough is going right that we can be here in the luxury of just sitting together and having this beautiful conversation. There's so much that has to be right for this moment to occur right now. and the miraculous of this moment right now in this presence with you and with this information. And I could worry, oh, but I didn't make dinner yet, or I'm out of eggs. And that's where my mind could be. It's the trap of just, again, what we worry about, and that it's so much harder, it seems to be, to hold space for all those things that are right. I guess maybe because it's already handled, and that's great, but maybe trying to not take it for granted, to sometimes, we can't always sit around, we'll never get anything done, but sometimes stop and experience, the depth of gratitude. And I think the blessing when we have an understanding, and Chinese medicine is so brilliant about no separation between the physical and the emotional body. There is no separation. And, in the work of, I'm just speaking to work that I'm familiar with, The Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Myss, that I read way back when, and how she speaks about biography and biology. What's amazing about the way I work is that the first thing I meet when I'm with someone is biography. I'm in the story. I'm asking them to tell me the story. And I speak explicitly. I say, it's incredible to be with your biography today. And then we'll do labs. And then we'll look a little more at biology. But I know, and I want to tell you, because of this experience, they're always twinned. They always are reflections of each other. So if someone has that emotional injury, and if it doesn't get tended to, healed, and again, we might not know how. I certainly didn't. This is my life's journey. This is my soul's journey too. And I'm coming at this not because I'm somewhere up here and kind of know. It's that I'm kind of a humble pilgrim along the journey, and how we help each other. And one beautiful woman I worked with, she said, it all comes down to this. We're all here to walk each other home. And I love that sentence. And I think ultimately that's where I am, and that I am on that journey with you. I am on that journey with all our brothers and sisters. And in this lifetime, I could manifest my soul's wish to show up that way. And I am not an MD. I'm a soul. I'm a being. I'm a lover of others, of life, of nature. And in this lifetime, I have that MD only because I saw it as a way to manifest my heart's desire to serve. But I'm not an MD. That's not who I am. That's not who you are. We have labels, so it just makes it easier to discuss and kind of transact, but that's never who we really are. We're all here together to experience the cosmic love language of the body and of the universe.
Absolutely. And there's no question people feel that from you. You're a fan favorite for a reason. And I mean, because it emanates from you. And I think it's fun. I'm getting just clearer about, like, when you told the story. So now there's two layers to it. When you told the story about removing the mercury toxicity, and then of course the body can raise in vibration. I do that with people emotionally in their interpretations. Because regardless of certain healing modalities, even getting into parasympathetic, you can remove emotional stagnation and blocks. But until we change the computer in how I look at something and interpret it, and then that's how my feelings get generated by my interpretation of the situation, until I change that, I will eventually get back to where I was, because my interpretation, what it meant to me, which evoked the feelings, caused that energetic experience. And while I used to talk a lot about subconscious mind, the conscious mind is where the momentum is created. The conscious mind is what we're feeling, and the feeling is the indicator to where we are vibrating and what we are experiencing and how connected or disconnected we are from our body. And it becomes really, really simple. And, I have all these tools, and I did the certification so that I could share some of the top tools. But now I have this, like right now, I'm getting this clarity on, like, you're looking at all the different tools that you're using, all the different levels and layers of testing physically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's almost like having, like Naisha's trained 10 plus, right, to look at a body. I feel like, oh, I have those too, but they're all emotional. They're all about interpretation. They're all about who am I in the world and what do I think about myself? And so it gives way for a deeper conversation that's very specific. Like we can pinpoint where someone feels a lack of freedom, which is underpinning all of the responses and all of the blocks and the disconnection. And if that interpretation can change and that story, that backstory shifts, and this freedom happens, and they can feel more love and compassion. And I think that's what I always tell people, is that all the tools that I use are always to create more love and compassion, not only for others, but for yourself, so that you understand and have compassion, so that your self-talk isn't abusive, so you aren't disconnected, so you aren't in victim mentality, so you aren't feeling like you were betrayed or let down or someone did something bad to you. Because from that position, we don't have power. And that whole empowerment piece is, how do I understand who I really am? How do I understand the connection, the opportunity, the power, the love, the possibility, and the potential that I have? Well, it's about removing the blocks. And you start physically, even though I know you do emotional stuff too. You start physically, and I start emotionally. I look at that story, and we want to deconstruct and take a different perspective to obliterate it. To me, healing emotionally is when you're different in the same situation. It's not about compensation. It's not about getting rid of this or getting rid of that or denying this or cutting this off. You still take you with you. You have to own that your interpretation causes the emotion that causes the frequency that sits and lives in your body. And we're not going to change it until you change the interpretation. So anyway,
would you say, this is a language thing. I'm trying to translate it into the way my brain thinks, that the interpretation is kind of also the context, right?
Yes,
and you
yes.
said that before earlier in the podcast, that, like the context is not an enemy context, but that there's a teacher here.
Yes.
In this, and can we reinterpret an emotion, or can we reinterpret a tumor as a teaching opportunity? And if we change that interpretation, we can have a different experience with the same circumstances, except our interpretation has changed. And that's a tool in your toolkit, which is the reinterpretation or recontextualization of the problem. Is that, are we saying the same thing?
We are. And while that sounds, that's exactly the simplicity of what it is. But the application is a little more complex, just sort of like saying the body's out of balance, I'm sick. Okay, on what level? Let's test your blood. Let's test, right? So you're looking at all the details. I have similar details in an emotional structure that looks at where the block is from an interpretation for who I am in the world, what I think about the world or people, what I think about myself, what I understand it to mean, which is most of the time not even true, but because we're only looking from one point of view. And so when we can change the point of view and expand that perception and maybe think about other people that were involved and anyway, it's layered, but it gives people freedom. And so I wasn't going to announce this yet, but you have, of course, it's you who evokes this out of me. I just want to share for those of you listening, and I was going to tell you off air anyway, but I might as well announce it, and I'll probably have a link for it.
Can't wait to hear. What is it?
Oh, it's good. So talk about like transmutation, and like and I'll go on the story later, but you mentioned Dr. Emoto's work.
Oh, yeah.
And here's an example of choices that we make. Like I had said earlier in this podcast, when, in someone in alignment, in connection with their body, fully in their presence, in a state, has the same toxic load as someone who's disconnected. That person who is connected is going to have a better experience and probably detoxify better than the person who's disconnected with the same amount of stimulus and environmental impact. So with that,
that's mind-boggling. If we could slow down and just hold that, right? Okay. Amazing.
I think my audience knows that. We talk about this all the time.
They do. I can just say it again. Things.
Well, let me just say it again for those of you that aren't in my community. Two people with the same environment, with the same toxic load, with the same negative stimulus, The person who is in alignment emotionally, they know who they really are. They're in the well-being. They're in the love language of their body. They are connected. They are tuned in, tapped in, and turned on. That person may never have a negative reaction to that toxic overload. And if they do, it'll be minimal and their body can process it very quickly. The person disconnected, that might be the difference of them having a serious disease. It's that energetic, the love language of the body. We're designed to heal. If we're in the love language of the body, things can pass through more easily. And it doesn't mean that we won't have problems. It just means that we will be able to fix them faster, and we'll have indications, and we'll understand the body. We'll listen to the body when it talks. So the Dr. Emoto's work, I was looking for a product.
Perfectly.
Good. I'm glad. And again, on the emotional side, I help people, and my trainers, we help people remove the blocks emotionally, like in your mental interpretation of a situation, in your self-identification, in the remembering of who you really are. Once those it could be one thing. I mean, my mother and father, years ago when I took Doug to my very first family reunion with him, I remember talking to I don't know what it was about. It was about my grandfather, but my mother had been holding on to this for years. Something came up about, well, when I was 13, a long time ago, your grandfather, when he came over to yell at your dad didn't defend me. And I was like, I was 13, and I knew then my father was in shock that his father was disowning him in the moment. I was sent away, even though I was next door watching the fight happen, and he was being disowned. He was in shock, and he's a man. So his brain isn't like going like this. So he didn't think about defending my mother because he was sort of thinking like, what is going on right now? But my mother interpreted that as my father not defending her, held that until, when was that? 2019? 2019, we had this conversation, and I thought to myself, and that's what I said to her, mother, you've been holding that for this long? Like, dad did not, he was in shock. His father was disowning him. I was like, oh my God, mother. And so then on the drive to the camp, I said to my dad, I told him, and he was like, what? And so he was going to have a conversation with her. So when she gets here, can you take a walk with her and and have this conversation? Because I know that's not what he meant. And he knows, and he was horrified that she had been holding on to this for so long. That foundation of my husband didn't defend me is a belief that gets stuck in your body. And then that just cascades into momentum of, I'm not good enough, he doesn't love me, whatever. And that
but also specifically our relationship to male archetypally, and the male is the divine protector and provider, and that doesn't mean gender, right? It's just an energy. So we can also, as women, be providers and protectors, but there is some lack that she was exhibiting very clearly through her interpretation of events, a lack of a feeling of protection or provision, or of that, a missing of the divine masculine in her life. And she experienced the lack of that. Where does that come from? Because it wasn't coming from him in that moment. It was an emotional, not a rational response, but one of a very large order of magnitude, clearly. And so circling back and saying, okay, I think what's also tricky is that we might have no conscious understanding of where that lack comes from.
And I have a great, but we start with the core wounds. It's my mother's core wound with her own father. I could track you back to exactly where, and maybe even when, that break and crack and misinterpretation became a belief and a knowing in her and her body, which has literally colored her whole life and all of her life choices. And that's one of the exercises that we use with people, is the core wounds, to literally diagnose the root of the problem. When did this
there's
start?
Another tool. So yeah. Interpretation, core wound. Your core wound is like my root cause.
Yes. Yep. And it colors the whole picture. Yeah, right. Let me go back to, because let me go back to my announcement, only because I want to share with you. No, it's okay.
I'm to hear it.
Okay, so I have wanted for years to do some kind of bring a product to market. When I was a trainer, it was a trainer product, and but the wrong energy was behind it. It was more about the money. I was chasing money. I was chasing sort of ease, and even though I had good ideas, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was, infomercials, whatever. Okay, so fast forward, I have a friend who's been on the podcast many times. She's got a very successful product in the world, and I said to her after we got done recording our 4th episode last year, I said, are you still willing to be there for me when I'm ready for the product? And I've kind of tested some other things along the way. And she's like, yeah. And I said, yeah, I still don't know what it is. Like that last thing, yeah, that didn't really work out and that's okay. And she goes, I know what it is. And I said, what? She says, wine. And I was like, ah. Okay, so I'm taking Dr. Emoto's work and I'm doing it on wine.
Oh my God.
Okay, because most of the wine that's out there, that's organic and da 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 da, I hate it. I don't like it. It doesn't taste good. I don't want to drink it. I don't care if it's healthier for me than other wine. If it tastes bad, why would I bother? It's a wasted calorie and alcohol. So I live in California. My favorite place is Paso Robles, jammy. Anyway, the best wine. And I have found I'm working with a company, glyphosate free, to take this wine. Now, that's not, I'm gonna use the microscope. We're gonna look at the crystallization of it before my treatment, and then I'm gonna woo-woo the crap out of it with my sound bowls, with my Reiki, with my words, with the crystals. We're gonna have a whole thing, and I'm gonna elevate the frequency of this wine to the point where if there's anything in it that isn't good for you, it's not gonna matter, because you're going to be able to drink this wine with this highest frequency wine. Anyway, the name of the company is High Vibrational Wines. So anyway, I wasn't going to announce that yet because I'm doing a test to see if it's going to work.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Oh,
I want to see
exciting.
if it's going to work. I'm going to only do 1 barrel of red, 1 barrel of white, 600 bottles total, 300 of each. So now that's the official announcement on the show, potentially. And if you're interested, I'll have a link for you in the show notes to tell me that you're interested, because I'm only going to do one test run to see if this is a viable business. It's definitely a passion. I have a wine podcast. I love wine. I also love health, and I can take and now meld all my worlds together in
That's
this
incredible.
product. So anyway, you mentioned Dr. Emoto. I'm like, Dr. Emoto, that's what I'm doing with wine. And of course I told Nation, she's like, well, the frequency is going to change. I'm like, of course I know that. But now I'll be able to prove it under a microscope and crystallization that the love energy that I'm going to send and be with these barrels is going to transform their molecular structure and the health component of the wine. So anyway, so that's my announcement. And enough about me. So let's talk about, because people love you and I love you, and what's not to love?
And I love you.
Thank you. So I want to talk about how people can work with you. You have other doctors that work in your practice in New York City, but you do also telemedicine, yes?
Yes. So it's been an amazing journey also, that I work with just the most heart-based, heartfelt, beautiful, loving colleagues. And so one of my colleagues is on maternity leave and just in mommy bliss. And I hope one day I have a podcast where she and I can talk about her journey into motherhood, because that's just such an incredible story, except it's not mine to tell. So I'll just, and then in my office, we have a doctor of nurse practitioner, Kira Oberly. She's absolutely brilliant. Talk about the law of attraction. I mean, she showed up, light pouring out of her, still, finishing up her program at Columbia. And she's like, I just wanted to feel what this office felt like. I remember I walked out in the waiting room. I'm like, who is this? And she had this opportunity in her final semester to be in a practice. And so she was in with me on sessions, and just we're growing this language together. And she's just there. She is the living manifestation of the law of attraction. She literally kind of vibrated our collaboration into being. And I'm just so grateful for her. She's so present and loving and also brilliant and also organized. And my other amazing colleague, her name is Rachel Straight. And her married name is Bewertz. I keep on messing that up. And what's amazing is that we've actually had a working relationship even prior to me opening my center. And she worked in functional medicine as a registered nurse for years and years and years and years. And again, like her own dharma, the own fire of her soul, where she went out and became a family NP. Both of my colleagues in the office are family NPs, so they can see everyone. They can see children. They can see, the whole spectrum. I'm trained in adult medicine. Sometimes because of my subspecialties, people come and see me as for their children as a subspecialist. I'm not a pediatrician. Anyway, so it's so nice that we can serve the entire community of all ages. And And Rachel, when you speak about the emotional body, I feel like she sees that. It's such a brilliance of hers. And interestingly, because through allopathic training, which of course she has had, there's no way to gauge that. There's no way to I guess reward that the way you reward for. I mean, she's brilliant also scientifically and academically, but I think that is where the emotional intelligence of my colleagues is really just beyond. And then, of course, we're doing all the diligence, the physical diligence. But I think, when you talk about the law of attraction, there's a reason I am collaborating with the colleagues I collaborate with. And I also have to say, our administrative team, they will hold hands and pray for people sometimes when they just, on a break. I mean, they just also are so loving and they're there. I think we share, because of the consciousness, because we are the way we together in the podcast world are building intentional communities. It's not accidental who will want to come and listen, that we are valuing things and vibrating at a certain frequency. So too, I find that our team, our work family, is vibrating at a frequency, and we celebrate, our community members' successes, and we cry, when someone in the community, suffers or isn't able to maybe transmute a physical pattern, and we have shouldered a loss of someone in this past week that we just love so much, and so we've had so many conversations just about honoring her and loving her and grieving for, a passage and a transition that we wish would have been much, much later. Anyway, so it's an incredible team. And we collaborate very closely. We communicate very closely. So to meet with one of them, you're not with me physically, most likely, but I'm looking at your forms. I'm looking at the labs. We're having conversations internally about, so I really do feel like I have my consciousness wrapped around all of our work together at our center. Was that I answered the question?
You did, because again, people who are watching this that are in my community and are looking for someone to work with, even if you don't, Dr. Rahav does all kinds of things. It's not just cancer. Cancer was the connection that got us together in terms of Nation, the metabolic approach to cancer. But
Nisha, my dear heart.
But she does all kinds of things, and her team does all kinds of things. And go to rahavwellness.com. RAHAV wellness.com. Follow her on Instagram. All links will be in the show notes or under this video, so don't have to worry about writing it down. Just make sure you click below and you will get all the information there. But if you're considering, and a lot of them are, I've had people who would love to work with you and reached out about that. So I want to make sure that they have the ability to do that. And if not with you, obviously with one of your trusted physicians in the office or physician assistant or whoever. Honestly, it's really, I'm going to say, I don't think it's necessarily about you. It's about your energy. It's about your energy, your point of view. It's about your holistic use of brilliance of knowledge coupled with the open heart of who you are. And I was thinking this when you were talking earlier, there are doctors and then there are healers. And just because someone's a doctor does not mean they are a healer. And just because someone's a healer obviously doesn't mean they're a doctor, but you are both. And you are, I think, a healer first. You are someone who I would not call a doctor, even though you are a doctor. I would call you a healer as a doctor. And those two things together, I think, just put you on a different level than most people, because whether people understand this conversation or not, those that might be new or finding it somehow, they can feel it. There's a resonance. Again, your innate wisdom of your body and your emotional intelligence, whether you're conscious of how to talk about it or to analyze it or to, look at it any differently, there's always like you said, when you walk into a room that there's someone that you don't like or you do like. That's just in all of us. There's a resonance. There's not a resonance. And even if you don't understand it, I have sometimes people would say to me in the past, long time ago, yeah, I don't know how to contribute, but I really love listening to you. Like, right, because they feel something, or they're lifted in a little bit of a way. And you're definitely a messenger, a transmitter, an inspirer, a healer, of course, a gifted physician also. So this conversation, of course, is not over. Dr. Rahaf will have her own podcast, whether I have something to do with it or not, because I
Of
don't
course
know.
you will.
Okay, but I'm just, no pressure. This is not about me. This
It's
is about
not about
you.
that. I just think that there are no accidents, and that it's actually you and these conversations, and may they continue and grow. Is I'm experiencing so much joy through what you do and how you do it. So of course that's the portal, because what brings you joy, and we said this right before we hit record. I think I was saying that part of the work that we're doing, as far as on a larger scale, is that you bring messages of hope and light and love and empowerment, right? That we each have agency, and we each have the ability to create a higher vibratory energy grid, and with it bring a more cosmically divine, joyful, blissful experience of living here. That there are, of course, other realities, but if we can have those other realities and find a way to transmute them and experience here, heaven on earth, as a journey, that and all of what is possible, the physiology, the hardware, the emotions, the all the layers that are part and parcel to being able to anchor that as our experience. You're opening that opportunity and that portal through your message and your brilliance and your work, and the kinds of conversations you want to have with other people that resonate with your mission statement, and that we are able together to experience the joy of that being what we're sharing with the world. And through sharing it, it becomes our own experience. And I, again, experienced that as absolutely miraculous. Look, I wanted to show you, look at the name of the book I have right next to me. Is there glare there? It literally says,
Bringing Heaven Down to Earth.
Literally is what is sitting right here with me. Isn't that amazing?
Perfect. That is amazing. And can I share an Abraham quote? It's going to sound like it's reverse. It goes with what you're just talking about. One of my favorite quotes about death, and it's a whole audio she did about sex and death being an orgasm, to let people know that death should not be feared, that it's literally reemergence of consciousness of who you are back into pure positive energy. And depending on how much resistance you had in this life will determine the massiveness of the orgasm on the way back. But so the quote, and when I would hear it, I would literally release it to me. Well, and you have to have the context of knowing that death is an orgasm. So with that said, the quote is, death is the relief from the release of resistance. And when I would hear that, I would go, oh, because we don't have to wait to die to release resistance. The point is, how can we live heaven on earth right now by releasing resistance and feeling and reaching for that well-being all the time, and allowing it in, and having the joy and allowing in more all the time? And how can we just, bliss out as much as possible in a conscious way, in a responsible way, in a full body integration kind of way, and live heaven on earth? I know it's possible, and we don't have to live the experience of crunchy, resistant, angry, stuck in our ways, not disconnected from everything. But then that transition will be joyous and wonderful and beautiful. And, no one should fear that, in my opinion, because you will literally, Dying to Be Me, and Nina Morjani was on the show. Read Dying to Be Me. Dr. Eben Alexander was on the show. Read Proof of Heaven. Both of them had the experience of crossing over and coming back. And anyone who's had an NDA says the same thing. And I don't even need that to know that for sure, because it resonates so deeply in my being that I know it. And so if you don't know it out there, and you want to know it, there are resources to do that. But in the meantime, you have the power to change your experience in this physical body while you're here every single day.
Mm-hmm.
and work with Dr. Rahab. So please, and if you want to hear from her, if you want her to have a podcast, and I know a bunch of you are going to, please, I mean, you can send me messages and I send them to her, but feel free to just bombard her with, I want you to have a podcast. I can't wait for you to have a podcast. Just tell her. Social media, send her an email. Just say, hey, let me know when you have your podcast. Put me on your list so that when you have a podcast, I can listen, because you are super inspirational. You're a rock star. I think you're amazing. And I can't wait to have you back.
I can't wait to have you back and experience another blissful conversation. You dear, dear being. Oh,
thank you.
I hug you. I pinch your cheeks.
I feel it. All right, everybody. Thank you. And please be in touch with this one. Bond her, work with her, bombard her with messages to get a podcast going. So thanks, Miriam.